Good afternoon. This is Edivard on Parashat Shemot. I would like to dedicate this as an Elias Neshama to my mother, Sarah Bas Leib, whose yahrzeit is this week. And Parashat Shemot is the first of the Parsha of Sefer Shemot. The Parsha has its name. The name Shemos, because it alludes to the naming of all of the people who went down with the brothers who have sons. You have Yaakov and brothers of Yosef. And the Parsha, after giving all the names, says that a new Pharaoh arose that did not know Yosef. Now, there's two definitions of that. Either it was the same Pharaoh as Yosef knew, and he would have been quite long-lived, but he decided to change his ways and not show appreciation or recognize everything Yosef had done for him. The other interpretation is a new Pharaoh. Either way, he received a prophecy. Pharaoh's astrologers told him on the surface that there was going to be a Jewish boy born who was going to be able to overthrow his kingdom. Since they did not know exactly who it was, Pharaoh wiped out all the Jewish boys and would allow the girls to live. And he tried to enlist two midwives, Jewish midwives, Shifra and Pua, to kill the babies or make it look like a stillborn to the mothers as midwives. If it was a boy child, and let the girl children alive. Now, these two people were really Yocheved, Moshe's mother, and Miriam, Moshe's daughter. Moshe's sister. In any event, they defied it. Hashem spared them. Now, so Pharaoh then ordered the Egyptians to drown all the Jewish boys for a certain period of time. And seems like a very tragic incident on the surface. However, as explained by Rav Yaakov Abel Sarah in his Yad Mitzrayim Haggadah, based on Midrashim, that in fact nobody was killed. Because what happened, even though Hashem made it look like that, babies were thrown into the Nile. But Hashem made a miracle. Not one of them died, and they were miraculously transported to the desert, where they were raised by angels. Now, question that goes here: if that was the case, why was Pharaoh interested in drowning the Jewish children, the boys, besides the fact that he thought there was somebody who could be born to overthrow him? He knew that 600,000 Jewish men had to be born, males, before they could leave Egypt. And he figured, in future parshas I will discuss the Torah's significance of number 600,000 in any event. He thought he could thwart it. So Hashem basically wanted to liberate the Jews. They got stopped. They were protected from the slavery 1 year before they were actually liberated, with the slaying of the firstborn, the 10th of the Makkah's plagues that were sent against the Pharaoh in Egypt. The Parsha then goes on, and Parsha goes out to fight goes out to see the people because he heard their cries, not their prayers, but their actual crying out, which went straight to heaven. And Moshe killed this Mitzri, who was beating a Jew. Now, I'll be speaking about that more a little later in the Devar Torah, who was this Mitzri. In any event, he killed him. The next day, there were two Jews, Datan and Aviram, fighting with each other. And they said, "Who are you, the judges?" Pharaoh tried to kill Moshe. And in the event, he ultimately wound up in Midian, where he met Yithro and this flock, and his daughters were taking it. And when he saw them being oppressed, he basically defended them and ordered Yithro's sheep. Ultimately, Yithro gave one of his daughters as a wife. And the question is, Sephora, and why did he get sent there? Why that particular wife? I'll be discussing that again a little later. Hashem summons him to the mountain. He sees a burning bush, and Hashem tells Moshe, you're gonna have to go act as my representative to help me free and my spokesperson, so to speak, and freeing the Jewish people from slavery. Moshe, being the most modest of all men, is arguing with Hashem for a week till finally Hashem orders him to go. He gets leave from Yisro to go. He takes his wife and two sons. At that time, Gershom and Eliezer with him, and he and Aaron go to Pharaoh. Pharaoh not only does not recognize Hashem, refuses to let the people go, but to punish them, until then he had been providing bricks so that they could at least build the storehouses with just doing the backbreaking labor of slavery, but construction, but not with the additional thing of having to make their own bricks. They cried to Pharaoh, and they cried to Moshe, what had been done? And then Moshe said, "You see, God, you made it. I told you it was only going to make matters worse." And that's where the parsha ends. According to some, his doubting of God was one of the reasons that he ultimately did not go into Eretz Canaan to Israel. There are other reasons which I'll explain as we get closer to those events. But there's a few things I'd like to focus on. One question is, who was this Mitzri? Why did he wind up with Yitro as a father-in-law and one of Yisro's daughters as a wife? And more basically, I'd like to also discuss, which is tied into this, who is Moshe in the first place. Moshe had very many special qualities. In fact, when he was born, there was a special holy light coming from him in the room where he was. His mother had to hide him because after 3 months, because all the Jewish boys had to be killed, she sent him out in a basket made with reeds, tar, and Pharaoh's daughter, of course, found him and raised him. Because it's explained that anybody who was going to be married, who was going to lead the Jewish people out, could not have had a slave mentality, needed the leadership skills without the slave mentality. So that is another question. And again, we know that Moshe had Nebuah from before birth, even when he's still in utero. It was when Hashem called to him. In the middle of the parsha, he already knew. Shmuel did not know when Hashem had to identify himself. That was not the case of Moshe. Now, I'd like to take some different understanding of Moshe. And the question I have, first question, is Moshe's name in Hebrew is very interesting. It's 3 letters. Mem, Shin, Hey. Now, that name, he has 6 other names, but we're not getting into that today, but he and before we even get to that name, there's a question, why are we told that Moshe was a shepherd? Why do we need to know that? Moshe haya roa. He was a shepherd. Now, first of all, why in the past tense? Why not in the present future tense? That's one question. A second question. That's one question. What's the importance of this occupation? Now we know that working with sheep, one has to be extremely kind and understanding. We saw that with Yaakov. Melech also played that role. Being a shepherd is a very caution thing to do, very important thing to do. But it's because what is the further connection? Is that Moshe was a shepherd like Hevel, Adam Rishon, one of Adam Rishon's first 2 sons. And interestingly enough, and this is based on Shar Pesukim, there was also a shepherd of sheep. And what's that coming to teach us? That he is a Gilgal, that Moshe is a Gilgal of Hevel. Now, what is a Gilgal? It means reincarnation, and the Shema can go from one person to the other. Now, Moshe being the leader of all the people, and is the source of all the Shemas, and I'll explain on the future Parashat, he was obviously he was a very special individual. That being the case, why did Moshe, what is the deeper meaning of the name? So that is explained in Shar Pesukim. Now, if you take the name Moshe, it also has remez, it has allusions, A-L-L-U-S-I-O-N, not illusions. And as explained by the Rav Shimon from Astropoli, that Moshe consisted of 3 Gilgulim. He came from 3 Gilgulim. Now I'm going to explain who those are. Gilgulim, in other words, he was reincarnated from 3 different people. We're all connected. And you could break it down, Moshe, to Mem and then a She and Hey. Now, what's the significance? This, and let's go from Matzah and Nala. Let's go in the order of the generations. That Moshe needed tikkun. We all have a connection to Adam Rishon. There's a very, even somebody as pure as Moshe. However, more than that, even more than that, Moshe, and at least in the Shemas from which he came, when he came, needed a tikkun. And who were the people that he was a Gilgal of? Well, 2 of them, he was actually Gilgal in 2 people, and he represented the 3rd manifestation, the 3rd reincarnation. Some say 4th, I'll explain that in a minute. And You take the names of Seth and Hevel. Seth in Hebrew is spelled She and Taf, and Hevel is spelled Hey Base Lamed. Now, if you take the first two names, first letter of each of those two names, you get Shein, Seth, and the Hey from Hevel. That becomes Seth. That's a Moshe. Last two letters. Mem She and Hey, it's She and Hey. Now, that still left the letters Taf Base Lamed. That was from the two. Did not have a tikkun because they said everybody needed a tikkun to raise themselves from the level of what Adam Rishon had done with eating of that famous fruit. And anyway, so how did they get to tikkun? How did they get perfected? Because there was no tikkun for the other letters, so to speak, the other aspects of Hevel. And Seth, which was Noah's son. And we get to the incident of the famous burning bush. Moshe goes up onto the hill where the Torah is ultimately going to be given. And then he says, V'yomer issues V'haba el har Elokim Reva, and Moshe came to the mountain of God to his Horeb. And then it goes on, V'yireh Malach Hashem Elav Levavat Eish Mitok Hasena, and Yorahine Hasena Boer Eish and Hasena Einenu Ochel. It said an angel of Hashem appeared to him in a blaze of fire from the midst of the bush. He saw and beheld that the bush was burning in the fire, but the bush was not consumed. And that's when Hashem, when he says, "I'll turn aside and look at it," that's when Hashem saw him and called him and said, from amidst the bush, Moshe, Moshe. And Moshe answered, Hineni. And he went towards the tree. He then told him to remove his shoes. Now, a couple of interesting points. This shows Hashem's manifesting this many, to Moshe for the first time. There's many explanations why it was done like this. However, leaving that point aside, which is a discussion itself, if you look at the word for blaze, Lamed Beis Tav, those are the three remaining letters. And by doing this, as explained by Rav Shinshem Astropoli, by doing that fire did a tikkun and purified the other aspects, the names of Moshe, of Seth, and Hevel. And by doing that, Moshe was then perfected because he was totally removed any negative qualities which was suitable for a person who was going to be Hashem's representative. And why Moshe twice? First Moshe was Hashem addressing him before he had the purification. Shema, second one, is after he had the purification. That's why the double language. Now, that is the explanation of Rav Shin Masipoli. So what happened? So in other words, that completed the tikkun of Seth and Hevel. The Gomri and Moshe, they in other words had their tikkun, they were improved, they were purified, and Moshe was the third group of Shlishi. Now, it was Rav Shin Masipoli was explained. There is a purification that is from Shar Gugulim, which also goes on to explain and gives more background, a bit more detail. It was not only perfecting Hevel and Seis, it was also perfecting Moshe, because as explained, there were actually 4 reincarnations. The first reincarnation the first explanation was that he was first Hevel. Hevel was reincarnated as Shesh, and after that into Noach, and then Hashem, the son of Noah. Now we see this must be very complex. Neshama, Hevel's Neshama had many parts because the father and son were lived alive at the same time, and how do we know that he was perfected? Because it says in Shemos 33:12, I'll know you by your name. That's the indication of being reincarnated to Hevel and to Shem. And to Noah, because it says Chaisnon Besod, Noah found favor. Now, so those two were hinted by the first letters. However, when he came to the burning bush, he rectified those letters as Hashem Masipoli. But on one more point, to hint that that flame appeared in the flame of fire again, building on what, in addition to what Rav Shin Masipoli said, it was a rectification for him, tikkun, because those letters hadn't been perfected. The side of judgment, that gave judgment, that brought everything into balance. But even before the bush, his blemish was relatively minor, and he had to be, buddy, according to Show William, he had to be perfected. Now that's dealing with Moshe. One remaining question. The other question I asked is, well, what is the Mitzri when Moshe went out in the field the first day when he grew up? What did the Mitzri have to do with Moshe? Now, to go back briefly, Adam's first 2 sons were Cain and Hevel. Hevel was attacked by Cain. What was the sequence of things? Well, Hevel asked Cain for one of his two sisters in marriage. Cain refused. Hevel became furious. He knocked down Cain. And then only after that, Cain was angry and rose up and killed Hevel. That was one. And that played out in the generations. So Yithro was a Gilgal of Cain. And future Parshal I want to say about Yithro was a Gilgal of Cain. And that was one tikkun Cain had to do, was he killed. So what was a tikkun for that? Moshe confronted him and killed him. In the future part, she'll also be discussing what wound up happening to this Mitzri, what the descendant he produced. And then, so that bear brought the balance. Cain had killed Hevel. Now Hevel had a reincarnation, was able to kill, Hevel was able to kill Cain. Now, that's one thing. So what about Yithro? Well, Yithro, Cain had refused to give his sister to Hevel. So now, the reincarnation of Cain, Yithro, had to give one of his daughters to Moshe Rabbeinu as a wife. And this also explains another matter. Why are Gershom and Eliezer, Moshe's two sons, did not become great people? And the one reason is given, you're in the presence of great man, often the sons do not measure up to the father, or daughters to a mother who's very charismatic. In any event, that's on one level. This is deeper. Because Moshe hadn't been purified, as explained in the Shar Gulim, his children were of a lesser quality, because they were not totally spiritually pure. We say the same thing with Cain and Hevel. Cain and Hevel, they could have been righteous, but they had imperfections, because they were born after Adam and Rishon already committed the sin and had been exiled from God and Eden. And we should remember therefore, we now had tikkun, it's that they were less of nature, and therefore they were not the level they would have been. As I said, we saw the same with Cain and Hevel. They were born after the Chet of Adam and Rishon and Chava. And in any event, we see that Hashem's plans of multi-generations, sometimes over decades, lifespans, centuries, had different exiles, and realize that everything that we see happening, even though we cannot understand it, is all part of Hashem's master plan. And we should definitely keep that in mind when we are at this very difficult and challenging time that Hashem's master plan is unfolding, and ultimately will be good for all of us. Good Shabbos.